we can make it faster. Poco is the sustaining flagship killer brand. And if you want a solid daily driver, low cost option, higher performance, or even a proper gaming phone, the label can offer almost everything. Poco is lifting the embargo on several phones today. I've been spending time with the X4 GT. Now, my buddy TK Bay, has been playing with the F4. So make sure you check out his channel after you finish this video to get the scoop on that phone. The X4 GT is a really interesting device. Again, aiming for a reasonable price point with solid features, but this is my first experience with a MediaTek Dimensity 8100. Spoiler alert, this phone is an incredible performer. Let's switch gears, let's take a closer look. Okay, design-wise, this is right in line with recent Poco and Xiaomi. We've got the flat sides, the fingerprint in the power button, headphone jack, IR blaster, and nicely balanced stereo speakers. From a design standpoint, the only minor gripe I would have preferred a full width camera housing. Like we saw on phones like the X3, there'd be a bit less of that table waka 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 whenever you put the phone down. Now, getting to the screen, you'll have to pardon that I'm absolutely terrible at putting on screen protectors. There is one included in the box, but you've got to put it on yourself, and I definitely jacked up the corner up here. This is a very respectable 1080p display with a maximum refresh of 144 hertz. That's a little bit faster than we've seen on some competing devices. And even though it's 144 hertz on an LCD, we still do get the ability to customize the refresh rate or do an adaptive refresh rate. Regardless, no matter what you do on the phone, performance is going to feel super slick, super fluid. I can totally hear some folks, either in other videos or in my comments, they might complain about the slightly larger bezels. There's a bit of an asymmetrical forehead and chin bezel, or even just around the camera, the punch hole. There's a bit of a black rim around that camera, and I just don't know that I think I care. This is kind of par for the course, and I don't think a slightly thinner bezel at a higher cost is going to be much of a premium feature for folks that are interested in the Poco label. I'm very happy with the overall viewing performance, nice color, respectable contrast, even if we don't hit, OLED saturation and OLED inky blacks. But the outdoor viewability is also pretty good. Poco estimates around 650 nits of maximum brightness when you have it set to auto brightness. I think the screen looked fine for short interactions out in summer Southern California sun. And I just always have to shout out the absolutely wonderful power button fingerprint sensors on Xiaomi and Poco phones. If you can't do something exotic like the super large in display that we see on Vivo, then I really do think that the power button is the most practical place to put a fingerprint sensor. It's extremely quick to unlock. It's ergonomically exactly where your thumb is going to land. It's a tactile landmark. You never have to memorize where on a smooth piece of glass it's going to show up. The phone is just instantly ready to be used as you're pulling it out of your pocket. Similarly, the haptics are nice and quick. There's a tight pop of reaction when you're typing. They're not the most powerful, but I prefer responsiveness to the more powerful fuzz. And the software on tap is MIUI. This is colorful and it's bouncy and it's responsive. This is really like the most fun Android skin on the market today. But I really love that it doesn't come at the expense of overall performance. These animations slide into place on the screen and everything is liquid, it's smooth. And even on phones that are lower power, the Poco X4 GT doesn't have any issues with horsepower. We'll get to that in just a sec. But I've always been very happy with MIUI performance in general. The only thing I absolutely can't stand is the split notification shade where you swipe one side for some things and another side for others. I always feel like that's way too complicated. And as long as Xiaomi and Poco are going to give me the option, I'm going to keep using the more traditional Android notification shade. It's just ergonomically better. But wrapping up software, I always feel like I need to reiterate that some of Poco's software policies still feel a bit heavy-handed. Why a calculator app needs this kind of privacy policy with data being sent to a server? Why do I have to agree to a terms of service and a user agreement for data being sent off of my clock behavior. It's just becoming a tradition on Xiaomi and Poco phones where I install some alternative apps to what was pre-installed on the phone just so that I feel like I've got a little more control over my data. I do have reasonable expectations that we'll get good software support. Get a major Android update, maybe two, but then a couple solid years of software support on the back end, at least for bug fixes and patches. And I expect that over the next couple years, a good chunk of our security patching, especially the most critical Android patches, are going to come directly from Google if we're keeping up with our Play services updates. But that brings us to the star feature of the phone, the thing I'm most excited to be talking about on this particular handset, and that's the SoC. This is being powered by a Dimensity 8100 from MediaTek. Just a quick tangent, the Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 powered phones, back in the day, Galaxy S20, LG V60, that SoC got a plus refresh, and then it was refined again as a Snapdragon 870. The 870 continues to deliver some of the best balanced performance in high-end devices today. Going on 3 years, Black Shark is still using it. Vivo just recently put it into the Neo 6. It's an excellent combo CPU GPU. So what if MediaTek took a similar CPU core design and refined it even further? Well, wouldn't you know it, we get one of the best balanced SoCs of 2022. MediaTek has really done something special here. Premium phones from 2019 are still overkill for daily driver use. But we can always ask for more refinement, better thermal performance, better lifestyle features like improved AI, improved processing, better audio, and better multimedia playback. So I'm showing this right now, and I don't think we can put much stock into synthetic benchmark scores anymore. As we know, lots of manufacturers influence the performance of their phones to get the big scores, but then you can't really use this power in real world apps. I like to test. The X4 GT takes wins in some very surprising areas. I run a beastly photo processing test. The X4 beat my Axon, the Vivo X80, and the Poco F4 GT, which all have the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, which is the top of the line Qualcomm SoC. The X4 was mid-pack on an audio podcast rendering test, just nipping at the heels of phones powered by Snapdragon 888s. And again, surprisingly, it beat the Poco F4 GT. Imaging and video did slow the phone down a little though. It's noticeably slower than a phone like this Neo 6 with the Snapdragon 870 when we're talking about rendering 4K video. That's the tier we're at. To realize the performance advantages of different phones these days, it's not enough to just open up a social media app and then maybe switch to multitasking. We have to test laptop replacement use. So it's not going to win in a sprint against a more expensive premium tier phone, but that finishes this task respectably fast at a lower cost, and it runs noticeably cooler to the touch than the most expensive phones of 2022. And ditto gaming. This is a game, I'm testing this out on Undead Horde. This is a game that runs like a slideshow on phones like the Xiaomi 12 and the Poco F4 GT. And it definitely stutters a little bit. It can't maintain a top tier 60 frame per second frame rate, but this is really good performance on a game that was built for a Nintendo Switch, and it plays respectably on a lot of other phones. This game is kind of a torture test because it's just a ton of unit management. So while the graphics aren't the most exciting, you've got all of these little minion on the screen, and you can really tax a phone pretty hard with trying to keep all of this running fluidly. It's been a weak spot for a number of Xiaomi devices. These kind of top-down and arcadey shooters. I love games like Neon Chrome, Undead Horde, Tesla vs. Lovecraft, and they've been almost unplayable on the most expensive Qualcomm-powered Xiaomi and Poco devices. This is running great on the X4 GT. And this is why I harp on. This is why I keep saying we just can't trust synthetic benchmark scores. This phone delivers numbers very similar to a Vivo Neo 6, a Snapdragon 870 when you look at Geekbench. But in a more graphically demanding game, this is Bright Ridge with all of the quality settings set to their maximum. I'm seeing almost a 15% improvement to frame rate. This is the first time I've seen a mid-ranger phone basically pin Bright Ridge to around 60 frames per second. But very interesting and kind of exciting for multimedia, the Dimensity has support for AV1. This is a new type of video compression starting to gain more adoption for streaming services like Netflix, promising better video quality at smaller file sizes. I took my Alien Blu-ray rip and created an 8 gigabyte UHD video AV1 compression, and it plays great on the X4 GT. It can be really slow to scan when you want to skip ahead to different parts of the film. Like if I try to find something that's just a little bit brighter, see just a quick pop. This is a really big chunk of video for the phone to be chewing up, and the playback can be stuttery on a 2080 Ti. It's stuttery on a Snapdragon 870. It's running really well on a mid-ranger Dimensity. That's wild. Again, it's not hard finding a more expensive phone that can beat out the Poco in direct showdowns, but this is a brilliant balance of performance to power draw. And it does, it goes toe-to-toe with the Snapdragon 870 and often winning in ways where this punches well above those synthetic benchmark scores. This is a real fight. This is real competition. MediaTek has done exactly what I wanted them to do. Switching gears to the camera tech, the Poco is solid if somewhat mid-pack. Here's where we get more expected mid-ranger performance. It's a very good main camera sensor. It's an okay ultra-wide. There's this little macro shooter. I don't think many folks are really gonna enjoy that. And the photos are nice. They lean into that punchy, saturated social media look. I think they're fine. The bummer with mid-rangers, we always have to compromise on video. This is my LG V50 with a Snapdragon 855 from over 4 years ago. This phone could shoot 4K 60 frames per second, and that video was software stabilized. The Poco is more powerful in every respect and has a nicer main camera, but it tops out at shooting 4K 30, and it only stabilizes video at 1080p. So your 4K video is sharp and crisp, but you're probably gonna be seasick unless you pair that 4K video with a gimbal or a tripod. I know a lot of decision making goes into how much a company spends on making the product, how much they can profit from it. It's even tougher on a Poco. This flagship killer is probably already priced at razor thin margins, but I'm getting a little impatient to see when a proper sub $500 phone will finally match the camera capabilities of a 4 to 5 year old premium handset. I really think we're due. I really think we should be there. And I also took the Poco out to the Natural History Museum for some low light shots, and I'm pleased with what it can do. I think we're right in line with expectations. The folks who would buy something like this and rely on it as their main daily driver, I don't think they're gonna be disappointed. Okay, and wrapping this video up, I can't comment as directly on things like the network and radio performance and the battery life. Wi-Fi is spot on. This is easily handling my cable broadband and my Wi-Fi 6 router, getting me really close to the maximum that my cable connection can support. But the phone doesn't carry support for USA 5G as far as I can tell, so I can't use it in the way its intended audience might. And that changes the discussion for things like, you know, runtime, battery life, and screen on time, where we have to celebrate mid-rangers again. This phone has a beautifully balanced SoC with a huge battery, just a tick over 5,000 milliamp hour. And not only does it support 67 watt charging, but the 67 watt charger is in the box. It's just better getting a phone with accessories included in the price. And especially when those accessories relate directly to features in the phone. You don't want to have to go and find what charger matches up with this type of charging spec. That's something that needs to be in the box. Whew, that was a lot of rambling. That's gonna wrap up this look at the Poco X4 GT. I've been silly excited to play with this, specifically because of that Dimensity. It drives a new level of performance to a super competitive tier of mid-priced phones. When we're considering daily driver communication, social media, and entertainment needs, I think there's a very broad and healthy audience of folks that care more about a phone that can last all day, it can charge crazy fast when they need it, and it's got enough horsepower to do some of the fun stuff over a smaller or a niche community of folks that need the absolute fastest media content creation tools. I wish we saw just a few more improvements to the camera capabilities, but I can't fault where Poco is making some compromises for the intended consumers. We have a great parts bin on display with this label. If you want better gaming, maybe you move over to the F series. If all you care about is media playback and the screen and the audio and the speakers, you can save a little cash stepping down to an X. Phones like this, the X4 GT, step up phenomenally when people consider shopping your old flagships. And maybe you'll get a slightly nicer OLED display and a higher tier of SoC performance from like a Snapdragon 888. But you'd probably be giving up the headphone jacks, and you'd definitely be getting overall poorer battery life, especially if you're really leaning into what a phone processor can do. The X4 GT is a terrific option in this space. Really glad I got to play with one. So I will, of course, leave a link down below for more information on the Poco X4 GT, and also a friendly reminder to catch my buddy TK Bay, as he's going to dig into the Poco F4. I think you're really going to enjoy what he has to say about it. As always, thanks so much for watching, for sharing these videos, subscribing to the channel. All the support lately has been absolutely incredible. Can't thank you enough. Those of you who are checking out my links in the descriptions, or if you're joining the list of names scrolling by on your screen from my Patreon, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. This list is basically the coolest collection of tech pals in the galaxy. So I hope you'll check them out. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet, at SomeGadgetGuy on the Twitters and the Twitch. Not so much on the Facebooks and the Instagrams, but I will catch you all on the next review.